Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Emmanuel Chee Peng will defend the academic thesis Beyond Hogwarts and Sorting Hats, How a House System Shapes Medical Student Support. May I invite you to present a summary of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you, Pro-Rector, members of the assessment committee, my PhD supervisors, friends, colleagues, family members, both here and online. Thank you so much for joining me today for my PhD defense. Really excited here to share with you my work on the student support and titled Beyond Hogwarts and the Sorting Hats, How House System Shapes Medical Student Support. This thesis is something that I hold very dearly to me, with a personal meaning as well. So in my role supporting students, I've seen firsthand how students struggle with academic struggles, imposter syndromes, expectations of their family members. And these struggles and challenges reflects, to a large extent, what the literature has been telling us, that medical students do face a higher prevalence of depression, stress, and challenges as compared to the general populations. But what struck me was not just the intensity of the pressures that the students are facing, but that many students felt that they did not feel comfortable enough to seek help, and thereby there might be stigma and concerns about confidentialities or what they tell the schools.
Recording in progress.
What they tell about the schools and their tutors, and what that might jeopardize their careers as well as their training progressions. So it brought me to this question as in, were we doing enough as a school, as an institution to support them? Do they feel comfortable enough to come forward to seek help? What are the nuances of our support systems? And in pursuing the research, and this research is really about to understand the nuances of support system, how do they function? And we want to look at it, the whole support systems from the perspectives and experiences for the tutors, the students, as well as the spaces involved in providing support. And in looking at the literature, we found that there are a few gaps in the current literature on student support systems. The first one is that the studies tend to be descriptive. They tend to be situated in the Western culture and context. There's less attention to the Asian context. And the confidentiality dilemmas has been quite a fair bit in the literature. But however, it tends to focus more on the students' perspective, how they feel about the confidentiality dilemmas, but lesser attention has been paid to how the people providing support has managed to navigate these dilemmas. We also have found that there's a gap in the expectations. We know that from higher literature, expectations can shape learning experiences. But with not much studies, has been less attention being focused on how the expectations of medical students could shape their experiences of medical student support. And finally, I think there's a growing attention on how the social spaces can shape belongingness as well as the sense of community. And we want to look more into this in terms of the student support system. And in pursuing this line of research, we have used institutional ethnography as our main methodological approach for all our empirical studies. So institutional ethnography, it is a form of qualitative studies, whereby it is look at the social organizations of everyday experiences. We find that that's particularly useful because we wanted it to a beautiful, valuable lens because it help to make visible the often rules and institutional policies which is often less visible. In this research, we also use an IE-informed approach, which means that we use the key concept of institutional ethnography, but we try to steer away from the jargons, the technical terms, as we wanted to make the research as accessible as possible to the publics and to our policymakers as well as to the school leaders. We also use activity theory as a conceptual lens to drive our literature research because we find that very helpful for us to map out the various dimensions and elements of the student support system. Our research settings and context. So this research is done in a medical school in Singapore, whereby it is a 5 years undergraduate MBBS program. What is central to our context is this thing called the house system. So as you probably have heard, the house system is quite synonymous with the Harry Potter's movie as well. So in this case, all students who enroll in this medical school is assigned to one of the 5 houses at the point of the research, and they stay in the same house throughout all 5 years. And in doing so, we also assign them a personal tutor, and in local terms, we call them a house tutor, whereby the main role of the tutor, personal tutor, is provide pastoral care support and not involved in academic progressions or academic matters of the students. And also another point to share is that these houses are symbolic houses. The students don't actually stay in these houses, but it's more like a name to say that they belong to this community. And we also provide like house room. It's like university common room, whereby to help the students to have the social activities, whereby they come together for social events. So the overview of the thesis is whereby it's made up of 4 studies. The first one, we have engaged on a critical narrative review to address the gaps of the context. The studies often descriptive and neglect context. The second one, we explore the confidentiality dilemmas, whereby we look at it from the tutor's perspective. Now, having seen the tutor's perspective, we now move on to the study 3, which is about the student's perspective, on looking at the expectations of the students. And finally, we look at the social spaces, whereby we want to see, look at the tutor's perspective, the student's perspective, and the spaces whereby all these activities unfold in the medical school. And in looking through all the 4 studies, we find that 3 themes emerge very strongly from the findings. And one of them is about trust, the second one about sense of community, the third one is on the power, agency, and legitimacy. And I'll structure my findings for the next 4 studies along these 3 main themes. For the first one, the context matters. We did a critical literature review informed by activity theories to map out the various elements of the students, the school-wide well-being programs. And we find that the trust is, the studies across all well-being programs is that trust is critical, but it's often reported as delicate and fragile as well. There's an emphasis on building social connectivity and sense of community, whereby a lot of well-being support programs group students into various community, and they have social games and events that to really foster the sense of community. And tutors play a key but complex role. Tutor is the one interfacing with the students, but sometimes they may lack funding, lack support, and sometimes they also have to grapple with what exactly their role entails in supporting students. And with this context, what was a recurring theme that emerged from the literature review is about confidentiality. And with that findings, we actually went to the second study, which will investigate on navigating confidentiality dilemmas, specifically from the tutor's perspective. And in that, we find that on one hand, tutors wanted to gain the trust of students so that they feel comfortable in opening up. But on the other hand, they also want to have a sense of accountability to their institutions, whereby they need to report certain confidential dilemmas. So we find that the tutors often have to navigate between all these tensions between trust and accountability. Some of them fall back to their clinician confidentiality, doctor-patient outlook approach in navigating this, whereas others use other approach. And we find that what is very interesting about these findings is that we often talk about students under the power relationship between the institution and the students, whereby the institutions would then have the power of the students. What we find that over here is that the tutors are now being monitored by the institutions on whether they fulfill their accountability to their students. And having seen the perspective from the tutors, we now move on to the students' experiences or expectations. And in this study, we find that the school websites, school handbooks often outline the kind of support systems available for students, and that builds up trust. And we feel that it's essential for students to open up and engage with available support. But however, sometimes expectation does not meet what they wanted. There's a misalignment between reality as well. So students actually created their own peer support network as a workaround. And that network also formed a sense of community for the students. And the systems tend to gain legitimacy if they could align to what the students want and what students felt is valuable for them. And with that, we finally go on to the final study, whereby we look at the social spaces, which really look at the university common room. And we find that the university has created these university common rooms, house rooms, whereby it's a convenient space, a safe space, and students trusted that space to feel safe in that space as well. But however, there tends to be a tension between what the institution's way of monitoring the space and what students wanted for that space. And that created some tension. And we find that in these studies, students actually provided agency whereby they resisted the institutional monitoring by asserting their own resistance about things like subtle acts of resistance, such as things like who should be accountable for the cleanliness of the room. So as we look back to our main research question, how do support systems function, we find that the central questions would be about how to support system functions. We address the 4 gaps, and we find that 3 key themes emerge from these findings. The first one is trust, and we find that trust is a metaphorical glue that literally bind the whole support systems together. And trust is delicate, it is fragile, and it's a breach of confidentiality can potentially damage the students' trust in the system. And also with the tutors, those providing support have to trust that the institutions have their back as well. We find that the sense of community is very important because students feel that if they belong to a part of a larger group, they feel more supported. But at the same time, we also find that some students may feel that they are excluded, not part of the group as well. And that brings us to the last point, whereby students have the agency to create their own peer support network to support them. In looking forwards, we find that future research could potentially benefit from comparative case studies from different institutions, especially when there's a cross-cultural kind of studies, whereby we look at some institution from this culture and that culture, and we compare them. We also think that it might be interesting to look at the emotional burdens experienced by tutors, whereby they have to, on one hand, fulfill the institutional roles and responsibilities in supporting the students, but on the other hand, they also feel kind of emotional burdens in having to navigate the confidential dilemmas and supporting students. In closing, I think that this research, we started out this research in looking at how systems shapes the student supports. And as you probably know, the house system is very much a Harry Potter's theme. And Harry Potter's Hogwarts and Sorting Hats is a work of fiction, but we find that the house system is still pretty much relevant in today's context in supporting students. And we hope that the findings can provide in some ways to help inform policies and processes to meet the evolving needs of the students and their needs. And with that, I have to thank my PhD supervisors, members of the SM committees. With that, I hand over to you, Pro-Rector. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation and the clear overview of what you've done and your findings. I'm sorry we started a little bit too early, so the audience probably has missed the beginning of your talk, but I think the remainder was pretty clear so that everyone could follow still. It's now time to start with the opposition, and the opposition will be opened by Professor Oude Egbrink, who was also the chair of the assessment committee of your thesis. She's Professor of Implementation of Educational Innovations at Maastricht University.
Thank you very much, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, I would like to congratulate you and your supervisory team with your thesis and your studies. I've read it with great interest and it was very well written, so also easily readable. I have to admit that I had to search for the meaning of the first part of the title of your thesis. But now that I know it, I have planned to view at least the first Harry Potter film to see it in action. The topic of your studies is very relevant also here. And I found it interesting to read that you, as Assistant Dean of Student Wellbeing, have investigated how your institution's approach works. It is great to see that a person in your position investigates the functioning of their own program to learn and to improve, because you are in the unique position to connect educational research with educational practice in the most optimal way. So that's a nice, very nice situation, I think. I would like to start with a few clarifying questions, just to get a clearer picture. How many students are admitted to the medical school each year?
Oh, yeah. dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. At the point of the research, it's about 150 students admitted per year.
Per year?
Yeah, so over 5 years, we have...
so you have about 30 students per house?
That's right, yeah.
Every new year?
30 students. Over 5 years, so 150 students over the 5 years.
Per house?
Per house, yeah.
Oh, okay. And a house tutor is the same as a personal tutor?
Yeah, in our context, a house tutor is the same as a personal tutor.
And each tutor guides how many students?
Each tutor guides about 20 students in total, okay. So about 4 students per year.
Per cohort.
Per cohort, yeah. So ours is a 5 years undergraduate MBBS
yeah.
program.
So you have more tutors per house?
Yes, we
okay,
do.
Thank you very much. That helps to get a picture. So being the first opponent, I would like to start at the very beginning of your thesis, namely your second sentence in chapter 1 of the general introduction, where you state that medical students often face higher levels of psychological stress compared to other university students. Is this true? And if yes, can you explain why that is the case? Because other students also face personal problems, have social and transitional pressure, feel lonely. So what is the difference?
Thank you for the question. I think on one hand, the literature has been showing that medical students do face higher prevalence of depression, stress, as well as suicidal ideations as compared to students from other disciplines. From my experience in a medical school, I feel that some of these challenges may have been contributed to the sense that these students are very academically, in our context, one of the brightest, the highest academically able students entering medical school, and they carry with them a fair weight of not just their own expectations of doing well, but also meeting the expectations of their families and peers as well. And also I find that the medical school in some ways could be very competitive for some of the students, whereby they strive to do their very best. At the same time, everybody is a top student from their high school, and in that environment itself, and I think that creates certain pressures. At the same time, these students in our context are largely 19 years old to 21 years old, and they also face some of the challenges like the other students in other faculties, transitional challenges, relationship problems, and other issues as well. So when all these are being combined together, I think that creates a certain amount of pressures for them in a medical school.
Okay. So in the end of your thesis, you conclude that policymakers and institutional leaders have to focus on building trust, fostering a sense of community, you all mentioned it, and enhancing student agency, to design structures and policies that better align with student well-being. Does this hold for medical students only, or also for other students? Because, for example, in our faculty, we have medical students, but also biomedical students and health sciences students. So when we would build a new structure for student well-being, should we mingle these students, or should we separate them? Should we build separate house systems for medical students and for biomedical students, or what would be your advice?
Thank you for your question. I think trust is a very important element for all student support system. So be it in the medical school, be it in biomedical school, I think trust is literally the glue that pull the whole system together. For the students to trust that the institutions will support them, to trust that what they confide in their tutors is safe and a safe space as well. At the same time, I think that for the medical school, the stakes are at times a bit higher because some students may be worried about progressions, residency training, and whether the people who are supporting them are their future colleagues as well. So that kind of like complicates the support systems between those in the medical school and for those in other faculty members.
So do you think that this is more important for medical students than for other students? Competition and fear for the future?
Thank you for the question. I think that the trust would be a very important element that underlies all student support system. And in the medical school, I think that is a growing attention that for policymakers to pay even more attention to the trust within the support system.
Yeah. Should we mingle the students? Is that an option in our case, for example?
Yeah, so in our context, we didn't have a chance to mingle the students because there's a medical school. Yeah. It will be an interesting study, experiment to see how that actually pans out in the research setting. Whether students feel comfortable like talking to students, other faculty, and then from the tutors, policies point of view, how that actually works out.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have time? Yeah. So I would like to go to chapter 4, in which you investigate students' expectations and experiences with the house system. You found that when a mismatch occurs between the two, this may result in sort of a disengagement with the house system.
Yeah.
In your medical school, this resulted in the setup of a second support system, a house fem or house family system, a peer support system, as I understand it correctly, set up by the students themselves. So now your school has two systems, two support systems. And on page 85, you conclude that a one-size-fits-all approach may not suffice. So how will you proceed now? You have two support systems. Are you planning to keep these two systems next to each other? Or are you choosing to improve one of the two, for example? What would be your plan?
Yeah, so in our context, it was very interesting because we got the main institution, the official system that's been set up to support students. On the other hand, the students support their own peer support systems that almost run in parallel to the official one. Yeah. And what we found out is that it was the two systems, in fact, complement each other very well.
How?
Yeah, so on the one hand, students who felt that they're supported by the official personal tutors, the institutional policy, they can turn to the institution for help. But for students who felt more comfortable in finding their peer support, they can turn to their peer support network as well. So interestingly, we also, given the emergence of the peer support system, we actually funded and supported the peer support system as a parallel system so that we can reach out to more students and hopefully more students feel supported in whichever mechanism that they feel more comfortable and trust with the system.
And do they all participate in both systems?
Yes, they do. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. So in our because the house system actually started out is official. The house family system started out as a kind of informal system, but over the years it has evolved to become an almost official system, if you like. Yeah. So now students will participate in both systems in parallel, and students is able to tap on resources from the official schools or from their peer support network as well. Yeah,
and are you also considering training your personal tutors to become more aware of the students' needs? Yeah. Is that also something that you are doing?
Absolutely.
To prevent a mismatch?
Yeah, so I find that expectations is quite important for both the students' expectations as well as for the tutors' expectations of the support systems, of the students. So we find that some faculty developments, some training is important to align the expectations. And we find that that would be helpful for the tutors in delivering the support to the students.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Oudijgbrink. The opposition will be continued by Professor Mattock, Professor of Medical Education at the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom. The floor is yours.
Dear candidates, congratulations to you and your supervisors on this novel, well-presented, rigorous doctoral research programme, which extends understanding of student support interventions. I really appreciated the focus on organisation-wide interventions and on economics, both of which deserve greater attention in my view. There was some really nice insights about relational dynamics of tutors and students, the tensions associated with confidentiality and the trust that underpins the whole enterprise. And I particularly enjoyed the focus at the end on social spaces, which is closely aligned to current interests in our own research. To start the conversation, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the 3 medical schools in Singapore. how they differ and how they're regulated, and anything else that the candidate thinks is relevant to draw out the distinction between those three settings.
Thank you for your kind words and for your questions. In Singapore, there's 3 medical schools. 2 of them are undergraduate medical schools, whereby the students, after finishing the high school equivalent, will then be enrolled in the medical school. And my institutions, whereby this research takes place, is one of these 2 medical schools. And for the third one, it is a postgraduate medical school, whereby students typically have completed like the first degree, and then they'll be enrolled in the medical school. And also the third medical school has a little bit more of a research focus. So that provides a broad background of the medical schools, 3 medical schools in Singapore.
Thank you. And I was interested that all 3 have house systems, which seems quite different to the UK system at least. And I wondered if you could say how that might have come about, or whether you have any thoughts about how common this approach is internationally.
Thank you for the question. I think in a Singapore context, the house system is quite common. So even in primary school, in elementary school, in secondary school, in high school, or junior college, we have the house system for almost all the schools in Singapore, where students felt from primary school, they already assigned to one of the houses, and whereby there's competition between the houses, and they felt that it's another layer of identity or community. In terms of the medical school, it's interesting that actually all 3 medical schools have this system. So I guess in a way we may have, it might be a long-running traditions within the Singapore's context. At the point of the research, my medical school is also affiliated, a joint medical school with Imperial College London. And we also, in that sense, we have adopted the personal tutor system together with the house system, and together with this house system, whereby with personal tutors in my institutions.
Thank you. That's really interesting. I'd like to ask a little bit about theory now. So I was interested to see cultural historical activity theory used in chapter 2 to map out the activity systems. So could you say a little bit more about how and why this theory was chosen over other possible theories?
Thank you for your question. So we find that the chat theory is a way whereby we organize be able for us to map out the different aspects, the elements of a student support systems. In particularly, we wanted to find out how in the activity of how a tutor supporting a student pans out. And we find that gives us a very valuable lens in seeing what the different aspects, how the student support system is being organized across different types of support systems. And in particularly, we want to use these systems because we wanted to also to examine the tensions that might occur within these systems and what are some contradictions. And when we look at the critical literature review, we find that confidentiality concerns is one of the recurring themes that pull out from this literature review, whereby the students tend to be worried about what they say to their tutors, how they might jeopardize their career, their progressions. And we find that as a theory is very helpful. Having said that, we also admit that this is one way to look at things review. If we adopt another theory, we could pull out different tensions and contradictions, and another way of looking at the whole literature review as well.
Yes, I agree. And I can see how it was used really helpfully for the mapping. I was wondering about some of the kind of broader concepts within chat, so the historicity and the multi-voicedness, and how that played out in the research. So was there a historical component, or the multiple voices contributing? Was that a feature of your research that you did or could have drawn out further with this theory?
Thank you for the questions. Yeah, indeed, I think the 2 concepts on the historicism as well as for the different perspective as well, I think that is very important. One of the things that we use this theory look at from the tutor's perspective and the students' perspective. But I think that what will be, looking back, I think what will be very interesting if we could also look at the perspective from the university leadership perspective, from the administrative point of view, maybe even from the patient's view of how the support system might look like. So it really to show the multi-perspective of the student support systems. And on historicism as well, I think that it will be really interesting to look at how the whole system has evolved over time, how history has shaped and informed the system. We try to do a little bit of that in our last study, whereby I look at how the history shapes the expectations and the house rooms and in other aspects. And admittedly, we could have do a bit more on the historicism part of it in our critical literature review.
Thank you. Yeah, and I was curious that chat wasn't taken forward as explicitly into later parts of the research program, and I wondered if you could say a little bit more about that decision.
Yeah. So initially we did a critical literature review across all the literature who has reported data on some survey data on student support. But what we found out interestingly is that most of these studies has reported on just satisfaction, whether students are happy or not happy with their student support systems. But we wanted to go a bit more, we wanted to find the nuances, and we thought that in doing so, we want to see how exactly is a tutor supporting the students come into play as an activity within student support systems, and also give an initial framing for the other studies as well. So with that in mind, I think we also adopted the chat theory in a way to frame our studies as a lens for us to unpack different aspects of this, how a student support system is organized, and that also inform our discussions and analysis, and finally to the later chapters, in the discussion chapter where we pull everything together.
Thank you. And my last question, you had some very nice consideration of reflexivity and thinking about outsider versus insider perspectives, particularly since you are a member of faculty in a managerial position in the study setting and thinking about the power issues in relation to undertaking the interviews. But I wonder if you could just say something about how that positioning and how the power issues might have changed during the course of the research, of the doctoral research. Was there any change, or did your positioning stay fairly constant through the study?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so for the research at the outset, I'm very conscious of my positioning within the studies. Should I continue?
I think technical support, is there a problem?
Go get someone, but I would advise me.
Yeah, you answer the question.
Yeah. So speaking of positioning, so I'm very conscious of my positions as a faculty member, as a member of the leadership team within the university. But we took pains to explain to the participants, to the students, to the tutors that this is a research questions. They can say as much as they want, however comfortable they are as well. Then I think what was really helpful was my supervisory team as well. So we bounce the findings, we check with each other to make sure that the findings itself is robust, and also in a way to reflect my own reflexive positioning in relation to the analysis, to the data that we engage in. Admittedly, we would like to also, looking back, we could have engaged like someone to collect the data. But we felt that at that point in time, as a PhD student, I should do some, all the data collection, and we find that was very important for me at that point in time. And that was my motivations for undertaking the data collections by myself in this research.
Okay. I'm not sure, maybe they can hear us? Karen?
Professor Matic, can you hear us?
Okay, someone went up to technical support.
Okay. Well, we continue with some of the opponents here, because the other online opponent is also not there at the moment, I think. So, Dr. Waterval, that's the next opposition. He's assistant professor at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, I would like to start with congratulating your team and you with your work, and I fully echo the praise that you have already received. I think student support services deserve more, and especially evidence-based attention and research. So I thank you also for that. Not as a goal in itself, because supporting students' well-being directly contributes to lower dropouts, better student performances. So not as a goal, but as a mean towards an end. And this applies not only to the medical faculty, but also across all disciplines. So in that sense, the insights from your work, if I may say so, reach far beyond the medical field. Having said that, I have to confess something. My daughter has read the entire Harry Potter series for 4 times, and I've watched the movie myself 5 times. So I consider myself a semi-professional Harry Potter analyst, and I think you do too, considering your title. Now, when I was looking, so it makes it morally impossible for me not to ask a question, and it's a promise to my daughter, so this is my first question. When reading chapter 5 about the common rooms, I was secretly hoping for a Gryffindor-like environment with moving stairs and talking paintings, and maybe a sorting ritual in which the students' preference would be taken into account like the sorting hat does in Hogwarts. But instead I found a picture of a television screen with Nintendos. So could you elaborate a little bit on the words of beyond Hogwarts? What do you mean with that?
Highly esteemed opponents, thank you for your kind words and for your question. I can assure you that there's a lot of Harry Potter-like design in the common rooms as well. So we got like an image of the 5 houses that we have chosen for the 5 the house rooms, and the design that was have with different colors, different emblems, and to different logos that is being adored by the whole room as well. The picture I have taken is to show a little bit about the tensions between the cleanliness of the room, whereby students find that it's a very safe space, they felt it's comfortable, maybe partly driven by the Nintendo Switch that you see in the picture as well, by the sense also to show a little bit of the messiness of the room, whereby in a way it reflects that the students feel comfortable in the room. But on the other hand, it also shows that the institutions wanted to monitor the room to make sure the room is clean, so that when visitors come, they can see that the room is in good shape. So the picture was chosen to illustrate that tensions within the house rooms.
Okay. So the word beyond, it is inspired by...
Yes,
it's not the word beyond that goes any further, because I would be very curious to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was inspired by, in part by the book and the movie, Harry Potter. And the house rooms is really sort of a physical sorting hat. We do assign the students to one of the 5 houses, and they have their own house t-shirts, their own house colors, and things like this within their own university common room as well.
When I hear you speaking about the cleanliness, it also makes sense to me why the janitor in the Harry Potter, Filch, is such an important person. It solves the problem. To continue on a little bit on that, I saw in one of your indeed reflexivity sections that you mentioned that you were quite neutral to the housing system in general. May I ask you to elaborate a little bit now that these studies have evolved? What is your position on the housing system in terms of how it contributes to well-being?
Thank you for the question. I mentioned it was neutral in a way because I still feel that there's no one size that fits all for all medical schools and for all students. The house system works well in our context in a way whereby students are provided the support from the day one they enter the medical school all throughout the 5 years. The personal tutors is helpful as well because there's someone familiar, someone they know from first in the year 1, and someone who sees them through all the 5 years. At the same time, there are also other support systems, like a purely personal tutor system in some institutions, and that worked well as well. So I guess it was really be context driven and what works well in that cultural, local context, and the systems could then be designed in a way to reflect the needs of the students and the cultural needs for the institutions.
Okay. So in that sense, you're saying it's very contextual, and in this context, these systems work, in your opinion, from your perspective?
Yeah, I believe so for my context. Yeah.
Can I ask, in the first chapter, in your first chapter, you identified a couple of definitions of well-being. You mentioned hedonistic, you mentioned something about social engagement, having lots of friends, but also the possibility to overcome problems as resiliency is part of. Now, is there a definition in this housing system? Which part of the well-being elements, if you consider these are all contributing to well-being, because it's just a broad concept, would it be helpful to make a more distinguished definition, or looking at what is how does the whole house system contribute to well-being? And is there some elements that are not maybe supported by this system?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the definition of well-being is still very much being contested. Some literature is associated with happiness in one hand, some associate with pleasure, some talk about as a reservoir of resources, and where there's an imbalance, and that could detrimentally affect a student's well-being. Well-being can also encompass various aspects as well, like social, emotional, even physical aspects. So I think that the house system, in a way, will address closer to the social and emotional aspects for the students, because of the way that it is built to foster trust, to address that sense of community, that students feel that they're part of a community, but maybe not so much in terms of the physical well-being part of it, whereby we do have some physical social activities, but that was not really what the house system was being designed and built for.
So the house system really contributes to the social and emotional and belonging and the trust.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So you agree with me that, for me, well-being is also about resilience. Are you able to overcome the setbacks that inevitably happen in life? So I was wondering if the housing system to somehow also could contribute to that?
Yes.
Or would you agree with me that this part should be covered in a different program or a different student support system?
Yeah, so I agree with you totally that resilience is a big part of a student well-being as well. Being able to face setback and then to be able to bounce back, or to take into everything the challenges as well. So in a way, we find that the personal tutor play in a way that role to help the students be like a safe guide to talk through these issues, and to support the students, to encourage the students when the chips are down. And we find that in a way, the system, the mechanisms allow for that kind of support to build the resilience. We do have some activities that that promote and foster resilience, but we find that this longitudinal support throughout the 5 years is something that could be helpful for our students to really to build that kind of resilience, and to reflect on what resilience means, and to hopefully to build upon that as well.
Okay, thank you. Is time for one more question?
Very short.
Very short. Then I change it, then I'll do another one. On chapter 4, on page 85, you reflect a little bit on the mandatory versus the autonomous use of or participation in student well-being activities. And you seem to suggest that cultural differences play a role in that. Can you elaborate a little bit on why you think, and it seems to suggest, I'm not sure if I read it correctly, that in the Asian context, a mandatory approach to student well-being activities would be more suitable?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so in our institutions, the well-being programs are in fact mandatory. So it is timetabled within the medical curriculum, whereby students will attend the house meetings, meet up with their tutors, and to participate in the various activities. From my understanding is that there are some support systems that in fact maybe it's not mandatory in a way, So I think there's perhaps two ways to it, and one, in our institutions, we find that being mandatory can be helpful in a way.
Can I focus
Yeah.
a little bit on that one? Because I saw that somewhere you said the meetings with the personal tutors are obligatory, mandatory.
That's right.
So students have to come and talk about their well-being. Would you consider that system, looking at the knowledge you've gained, suitable, given your context, or not suitable? Would you change that?
Thank you for the question. Looking back, I feel that the mandatory systems has advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage is that students might feel compelled, they're being forced to go to attend to see a personal tutors whereby they don't have a problems at all to talk about. But on the other hand, by putting aside protected time with a regular check-in, I will find that can be helpful for students and tutors to be able to check in on each other. I mean, for the tutors to check in on the students to see how they are doing and progress over time, build rapport and build trust. And in time, when some students have problems, they'll be more willing to open up and to share their challenges with their tutors.
So would you recommend my boss that we have mandatory well-being meetings with our students?
Thank you for the question. It will be very much driven by context. So in our context, we find that mandatory is one approach. So for your context, it will be considerations of your students, the university leadership's perspectives, and as well as the wider cultural considerations for whether it's mandatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Waterval. In the meantime, the internet connection has been repaired. Thank you, Professor Matic, for your contribution. And we continue with Dr. Mogali. He's Associate Professor and Head of Anatomy at the Lee Kong Chiang School of Medicine, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore.
Hi, thank you for this opportunity. Just want to let you know my internet is somewhat unstable here at some point, so please bear with that. Hi, Emmanuel. Congratulations. Thank you for putting up such an important study, which is relatively unexplored. My questions mainly related to the sample size that in terms of the number of interviews and the number of students being involved. For example, in the study 2, where 11 interviews were there, is that enough to understand the complex role of a personal tutor? Similarly, in a fourth study, there were 22 interviews with different groups of students. Would those interview number would be provide full picture of how students experience social spaces? So my question I had two questions, one with the personal tutor and one with the students. Could you please explain or elaborate?
Opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. For the sample size, our motivation was to have a rich picture of the students as well as for tutors. And that was the driving force, the motivations in terms of the data collections that we have. And also we find that for both sample size, we have also considered the concept of data sufficiency. We find that we've collected sufficient data to inform our analysis for these two qualitative studies. Having said so, we're also interested to have more sample size in the future, to recruit more students from different years. In fact, have followed that out through longitudinal studies. As what's in a qualitative way. I think that will be very interesting to bring this research to the next level.
Thank you. So another question is related to the interpretation of between the tensions between the confidentiality and the institutional obligations. Could you elaborate on how were the tensions between the confidentiality and the institutional obligations were explored, and what framework did you use to guide those interpretations?
Thank you for your question. So the tension is really about when the students have something that they want to tell their tutors, but they're worried that what they tell their tutors might eventually go back to the school, to the medical council, and might even go to their colleagues in their workplace. And as a result, they might not be able to find the placement that they want, or how that might impact their progression in the medical school, eventually for residency training. So they often go to the tutors and say, can I trust you with these secrets, these things that I'm going to tell you? On one hand, but on the other hand, the tutors wish to maintain that trust, but they also has an institutional accountability to the school to report certain well-being issues to the institutions as well. So they often have to navigate this dilemma of maintaining the trust with the students as well as fulfilling their institutional accountability. So in doing so, we find that we use the institutional ethnography approach as a helpful way to look at the different policies, the different structures, and to see what kind of policies and structures are sometimes may not even be visible, or we don't pay enough attention in day-to-day practices, but somehow it becomes, when you put under the microscope of the confidential dilemmas, it becomes very obvious that the way they work on the workaround. So for example, all our tutors are supposed to write some notes about post-meeting, and one of the findings is that they have written workarounds, like putting in general comments about their well-being issues, things like this, instead of writing down very specific concerns. So that was one of the workarounds that they have, the tutors have implemented in order to maintain the trust, but at the same time fulfill their institutional accountability to the institutions.
Thank you. Maybe perhaps the last question from my side. The house system, it does bring a lot of benefits, and it adds strength to the overall well-being of the students while they are in the medical school. But it might also bring in some unequal experiences across the tutor. For example, some students would have a better opportunities for some houses, or they might have a very helpful, very engaging tutors. So how would maybe your findings or what recommendations you have to mitigate this issue of unequal experiences across the houses?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Indeed, some students find that there's a lack of a chemistry with their personal tutors. So what we have done in this institution is we have this group mentoring, whereby each house is staffed by a group of tutors. So if a student doesn't feel very comfortable with their personal tutor, they can approach another tutor within the same house as well. So in this way, hopefully, every student would have a chance to speak to someone that they feel comfortable with, someone they trust, and be able to seek help on a timely basis for their well-being concerns.
Okay, thank you. These are my questions.
Dr. Mogali. Then it's time for the last opponent. It's Professor De Nooijer, Professor of Interprofessional Teaching and Learning at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, congratulations for you and your supervisory team with your thesis. I read your book with great interest, and it's a timely and important topic given the health and well-being of the students worldwide, not only medical students, I think so. And my task today is also to ask you some critical questions, and I would like to go with you to chapter 5, because I'm very curious about the concept of the common rooms and its impact on well-being. So my first question is about the photos I saw in your presentation, but also in the book. I see big screens and large couches, and it doesn't look a lot like Hogwarts, I think so, although I'm not a Harry Potter fan. But it also doesn't give me the impression that it helps for health and well-being. So I wonder if the impact on well-being will be caused by these rooms, or if there is an alternative explanation, for example, meeting peers and interacting with them. And you already referred to that during your presentation, but also in answering one of the other questions. So do you think that it's plausible? And if yes, could you think of other social spaces that facilitate those meetings, meeting peers and stimulate these interactions? And that have more impact on well-being? Can you think of some other spaces? And
Dear highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your kind words and for your question. Indeed, the social space, the picture that you saw, there's a sofa, a couch, a TV with a Nintendo Switch as well. It's more meant for a social kind of setup. What we found that was really interesting is that it was being constructed as by the students perceived as a very safe space. So when they find that they're down, they face some challenges, it's a safe space for them to go and seek support and to be able to feel comfortable there and to meet up with their friends and as well. I think certainly that there would be other places whereby the students, ideally, other places that the student will feel comfortable as well. So we find that the house rooms, the university common room is one space. Some students reported that our library seems to be a safe space. At the same time, the library also is associated with studying very much, and maybe they couldn't chat with each other that much, can't talk too loudly, and as a result, they don't feel that's safe as there. Yeah.
But we know from research that, for example, being outside and being physically active also helps to improve well-being. So I wonder why you choose for these common spaces inside a building and not, for example, for a rooftop garden or sports facilities outside where they can also meet each other. Can you explain why you facilitated those common rooms inside?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's we feel that the outdoor space, the parks, the greenery certainly has a very strong effects to the student well-being. In our context, it is a high-rise medical school, and the only space, and we are very near the hospital as well, the only space that we have will be the common rooms within that building for students to gather. We do have these sports facilities, but that will be at another site, another campus that is a bit far from where the main teaching campus was. But there is something that we're looking at in the future to see how these spaces contribute to the students' well-being.
Okay, that's also a nice bridge to my follow-up question. Can I ask one of your paranymphs to read proposition 1 and 2?
Proposition first. Student support systems often achieve greater impact when they embrace a more holistic approach rather than relying on individual intervention. This dissertation. And proposition 2. The true effectiveness of student support initiatives extends beyond student satisfaction metrics. This dissertation.
Thank you. I hear the words impact and effectiveness on well-being. So I have expected some somewhat different suggestions for further research. And based on your suggestion on my first question, I miss how you assess impact on well-being. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit how you would investigate whether the availability of those social spaces have impacts on social well-being, and how would you do that? How would you investigate the true impact on well-being?
Thank you for your question. So the impact here, we're looking at the nuances of the space itself, how it can be constructed as a private space, experienced by the students, how the school felt that it's a public space, and that those spaces sometimes come in tension and conflict with each other. So I guess the true impact here would be how these tensions impacted on the students' perception of these spaces, as whether they feel that they're really comfortable and safe within these spaces.
And can you think of a design what you would use to compare maybe those common spaces with other?
Definitely. I think it would be very interesting if I were to redo the whole research or in the future itself to look at actually comparison studies with another institutions whereby the spaces, it could even be like a seminar room over here or a lecture theatre, or how these spaces evolve over time, or students' experiences of these spaces evolve over time as well, for the same cohort over the same year, or how the different cohorts, those in preclinical training versus those in clinical training, may have perceived it differently. And I think these were very helpful to inform us about the effectiveness, impact of these spaces on their well-being. Yeah.
If I may do a suggestion, I would also include some other outdoor social spaces where they can meet and interact.
Thank you.
Also, what you described in chapter 5 was that those common rooms facilitated those sense of belongingness, connection, and that it shaped identity. And these are aspects that medical students also need for their collaboration with other healthcare professionals in their future jobs. I'm interested in these concepts from the perspective of interprofessional learning and collaboration, because literature suggests that these concepts relate to better collaboration practices. From that point of view, what do you think of the idea to open these houses not only for medical students, but also for allied health profession students? And I already heard in one of your previous answers that you only have a medical school. So I would like you to imagine, maybe like Harry Potter, what it could be in the future and how that helps to prepare students for their future in professional collaboration.
Thank you for the question. So in my institutions, we only have a medical school. We don't have allied health, pharmacy, or pharmaceutical. But I think it would be very interesting if we can maybe combine that with a biomedical school. And
Who asked?
You want to shortly finish your answer?
if I may, yeah, to combine with the biomedical students to really assess how the health system could come together. Thank you.
Thank you. Emmanuel and Chee Peng, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company leave this room with the beadle, and after the deliberation, the beadle will come and collect you to return to this room.
May I invite you?
Yeah, thank you.
Parlims, please. Please come with me.
Emmanuel Chee Peng, the degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Driessen is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Please all rise.
Gelijk goedgekeurd is. Okay. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of scientific integrity at all times? To be careful and honest, transparent, independent and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Emmanuel Chee Peng, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by customs and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certificate signed by the rector, the secretary and the other members of the committee and affixed with the official seal of the university. Mag ik het aan jullie geven?
Please be seated.
Good morning, everyone. Dear Dr. Tan, dear Emmanuel, I'd like to congratulate you on your doctorate degree. I do this on behalf of the supervisory team, Erik Driessen, Janneke Frambach, Ronja Kearney and myself. It's been a pleasure and an honour to work with you during your doctorate. We're extremely proud of what you've accomplished during the last few years. I think you and I had our first discussion about the possibility of a PhD in health professions education around spring 2020. It was very early after I arrived in Singapore. So we then reached out to Eric and he encouraged you to register for the Maastricht PhD writing course in summer 2020. So this was a very tricky time for everyone, but COVID did have one benefit. The PhD writing course shifted to online. And this made it much more accessible because it meant you could take the course without taking time off work or travelling. It did, however, mean lots of late nights and evenings work. So over the next 6 months or so, Eric, Janneke, me and you had regular discussions about your PhD proposal and that developed as these things do over the next 6 months or so. And via email and Zoom, you drew in our different perspectives wisely. And in March 2021, you submitted the final version of your thesis proposition, and in June 2021 it was approved. You'd also successfully applied to get some sponsorship locally from our institution, LKC Medicine, to help with the fees, which was great. But sadly, this sponsorship didn't cover travel. But we managed to work around that, meeting in person at events such as AMI, and whenever we were able to, using Zoom and Teams efficiently and fruitfully. So after a successful first study, the literature review, we started to see the direction of travel for your work in terms of theory as well as what the studies were going to look like. This led us to expand the supervisory team to also include an expert in institutional ethnography, Ronja. So our happy band of 4 supervisors progressed, 2 internal supervisors, 2 external supervisors, 2 from the UK, 2 from the Netherlands, yourself from Singapore, so a very multinational group. But we all worked very well together and your work progressed at a good pace. You needed less than 4 years to carry out the primary research, to conduct the labour-intensive qualitative data collection yourself, as mentioned, and write it all up, 4 papers and the dissertation. You did this in a fairly isolated circumstance. You weren't surrounded by a large healthcare profession education research group. We were really kind of starting that going locally. So you did a lot of work on your own. Your excellent self-directed learning skills really helped you with this, and you had clear ideas of what you wanted with your research, both in terms of self-development, in terms of gaining knowledge, to help improve things on the topic of student well-being. So your research is excellent, your language skills in writing are clear and focused, and your work really helps shine a light into the black box of holistic school-wide well-being programmes, identifying tensions which might jeopardise such systems and factors such as expectations which influence how students engage with support. So we have changed things locally based on your work, and the reception by the wider community of practice of your outputs, particularly in the form of AME presentations and 4 excellent papers, indicates its impact goes far beyond the context of data collection. And I'd like to add that because your context is non-Western, it's particularly useful. As you said yourself, so much of the previous work in this topic is from the global north, from Western countries, where the relationships between students and staff and students and systems are very different from our own context of Singapore. Your work thus contributes not only to well-being but also to the conversations in the literature and the importance of context and the need to consider wider social norms when planning and evaluating systems. So thank you for that inspiration. 3 of your 4 papers were published before you submitted your dissertation, and the 4th was published just a few weeks ago. And if I remember correctly, only 1 article was rejected by the journal of your first choice. So all the others were accepted in the first journals that you targeted. So that was remarkable. But you didn't do your PhD, you weren't fully focused on your PhD work. This was not the only thing that was going on in your life over the last few years. You were also progressively succeeding in a very demanding day job. When we first met, you were an educator, but difficult to explain to people that don't know LKC medicine, but it was on a slightly odd track in our university, a track where educators are labelled as management staff. It's very peculiar, and I can't think of a parallel elsewhere. However, very quickly you shifted from that track to the education track, Emmanuel was the first person ever to do this in the university. So he became a lecturer, and after just a few years as a lecturer, he was promoted to senior lecturer last year. So I was extremely proud of this, but this was all on your own bat. So at the same time as doing the PhD, you were working tirelessly to support students and contribute more holistically to LKC medicine activities, which did involve a huge curriculum reform and a large increase in student numbers, so it wasn't as if it was a quiet few years locally. But it wasn't all work and no play. You had your family life, your daughter had her critical examinations in Singapore, the PISL examinations, which dictate the rest of one's life as far as I can see in Singapore, and you supported her through these, and like you, she achieved brilliantly. You also managed to keep up your running and your family life. I would add that I think a part-time PhD as a mature student the PhD is yours, but it's a whole family endeavour. So we must congratulate your family as well and thank them for supporting you. So much was going on for you, but we were never able to detect a single sign of stress. You always, and with always, I do mean always, appeared relaxed and to enjoy discussing research, thinking about projects, accessing the literature, analysing data and writing. So how you have managed to juggle everything so successfully fills us all with admiration. I look forward to seeing you flourish as a postdoctoral researcher, someone who will continue to change the way we think about student well-being in medical education. So our congratulations are not only for you, Emmanuel, they are also for your family. You can be very proud of what Emmanuel has achieved. So we say goodbye as supervisors and now welcome you as a scholar in the field. Thank you and congratulations again. What's next?
Dr. Tan, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I would like to congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. I also like to congratulate your family present here and all the others probably online. And I want to congratulate your supervisors with this great PhD defense and thesis. I'd like to thank the members of the degree committee present here and present online. Thank you for the work you have invested in judging the thesis and being here during the defense, for the lively discussions. Maastricht University really appreciates your contribution. Yeah, Dr. Tan, it's almost done. I hope you enjoyed the PhD defense. It seemed like you did, but you never know. So maybe you're very critical of what you have said and think you could have done better. But I can tell you that the degree committee was very satisfied with you, the way you defended your thesis. Yeah, and with this, we come to the end of this academic session, and I close the academic ceremony.
Agda, would you give the word to the online?
Yeah, maybe.